Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is perspective and how shifting our perspective shifts our experience. And when we stand back far enough, we can gain a deeper view of what may look like a grander plan. So before we get started, it should be a fun conversation. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, and creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel all those sensations, the friction, the temperature, the motion, the pressure, and the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So I'm thinking that we might be having some technical difficulties right now because I'm not seeing this show up on Facebook. I think I might be having some technical challenges, maybe a latent connection. I'm not really sure what's happening, but it looks like we're not really going live here, but I'm not certain about that. Let's see. If you're seeing this, it would be awesome if you could chime in. I'm trying to bring it up on Facebook without any success. So I think we might have some issues here. Anyway, let's take the opportunity to just move on through and see if we can, let me see if I can record this. I don't know if I can, let's see. We'll try recording this. So, okay, welcome, welcome, welcome. So today's topic is perspective. And the idea here is that we can shift our experience by shifting our perspective. And as we allow ourselves to stand back to get a broader picture, a broader view, we often can see an order to things or an orchestration of things that is not visible when we are immersed in the moment, when we're immersed in just the immediate incidents or surroundings. And I invite you to take a look at your life long term to see how wonderfully serendipitous events just sort of weave in and out to create this beautiful tapestry of coincidence and grace and sort of a coherence and continuity that that makes for quite the interesting tapestry, and maybe exposing some sense of purpose and direction. So there have been many instances in my life where I've had serendipitous meetings, and then years later, those meetings have fruited into something else, where there are these threads that carry through in winding paths through our lives, creating a certain poetry or melody or artistry of connection. And those are recognizing those kinds of patterns and those kinds of connections just lights me up. It's winks from the universe to see how interconnected things can be, and how it sort of feels like we are actually going into, going in the right, in big air quotes, the right direction. Even through our pitfalls, even through our stumbles, that somehow things fit into this marvelous tapestry. So, it just came to mind years ago. I went to a family therapist. I was a kid, and I was the only one in the family that ended up going to the family therapist. But I went to a family therapist, and he did a Rorschach test, which is the ink blot test, and you're supposed to interpret these ink blots. And what I remember from that is being told that I didn't have to make everything into a unified picture. There's Rosalind. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Great to have you here with us this morning. We seem to have had some technical difficulties in the beginning, and I wasn't sure if we were going live, but it's wonderful to have you here to affirm that, Rosalind. So welcome, welcome. We're talking about perspectives. So anyway, these ink blot tests, or just blotches on paper, and sometimes it's one blotch and sometimes it's multiple blotches, and where there were multiple blotches, I had a unified image of it, and the counselor, or I don't even know if he was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I have no idea. But anyway, he said, it doesn't all have to be part of the same picture. And it's interesting, because I think that that's been my orientation, is to unify things, to look at the bigger picture, to look at the interconnection of things, rather than to isolate this, that, or the other thing, but to see it all in concert with everything else. And when we are able to step back far enough to get this bigger perspective, we often see these patterns that are just so magnificent and intricate and magical. And it reminds me now of the view that the astronauts had of the Earth from space. And it gave a whole new perspective to recognize there's just this blue marble, this beautiful blue marble that is not infinite, that is something to cherish. It shifted a perspective to appreciate the preciousness, I think, of the planet, and the boundaries of our resources. And I think that when we stand back and look at our lives and the patterns that move through our lives, we can gain a greater perspective on who we are, where we've been, where we're going. I think the reason that this came up is because I had a wonderful conversation yesterday with some folks that are connected to all kinds of people that I've been looking to connect with for Sustainability Now, and to to be raising awareness and sharing the wisdom of all these different people. And it was so fascinating because it turned out that they mentioned someone that I know of through someone else, and what happened was that all these threads became intertwined and interwoven, and it made me kind of step back and look at the different threads of my life and my connections, and to appreciate those things in a very different way. Oftentimes we feel like we're not making any quote unquote progress, like we're just putting one foot in front of the other. And then every now and then we have an opportunity to see the grander view and to recognize that events, people, timing, whatever is converging toward an intention that we've had. So those are moments when we are able to step back and see those things. We literally have a broader perspective, and it shifts, for me anyway, it shifts my beingness around trust and faith, actually. Like, it deepens my confidence that things are unfolding exactly as they are meant to be unfolding, and that there's no need for impatience or pushing the river, that we get to allow life to unfold, and that in its unfolding there's so much more richness than what we can create in our deliberate limited ways. So I know I've discussed with you this book that I've been reading and working with called The Energy of Money. And it's about transforming your relationship with money. And there's an exercise in it that's very much like creating a vision board. Rosalind says, what we are looking for is from where we are looking from. I love that, Rosalind. Yes, what we are looking for is dictated by where we are looking from. And so if we can expand that space from which we are looking, then we have so many more options available to us. Good morning, Robin. So wonderful to have you joining us this morning. We're talking about perspectives, and even beyond that, I think we're talking about the magic that of life's journey, where it may seem like there's no order to things or there's no purpose, but I have had occasion over and over and over to be recognizing, wow, there's something greater at work here that I'm in service to. And And this goes back to the notion of who we are is life unfolding through us, life expressing itself through the unique vehicle that we are for life. And we each have our purpose. At least this is my hypothesis that I operate from, is that we each have a purpose that we came here to fulfill, and it's the tuning of our unique vessel that allows that expression, that unique expression of life that is moving through us. And I shared that idea actually with my friend and neighbor the other day. And, I said, I've been looking at this identity thing for quite some time, and the best definition I've come up with for who I am is I am life expressing itself through this unique vehicle. And I said, it's great, it's cool, right? And she said, yeah, means I don't have to do anything. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing. It's like, no, we just get to be. We get to be that expression of life. And it makes space for life to unfold, and for these beautiful threads of intention to connect in ways and patterns that are so far beyond our imagination to orchestrate. So anyway, getting back to this book, there's an exercise to create goals, and I'm not a big one on goals as much as I am about intention. And when we talk about goals, we want to look at, it's creating a SMART goal. So it's specific, what's M? I'm not even remembering, but specific, attainable, time-bound, and I'm not sure what M and R are, but I know that there's power in creating these visions, these goals that are time-bound. And the thing is that in their specificity, they're also limited, right? Because there's so much more, like the artistry with which events occur and correlate back in time and forward in time, and the interrelationships, they're beyond my capacity, at least, to have imagined, to have it orchestrated. And it's such a humbling experience to be looking at how all these different things, these different events, converge over time in experience. So and the thing about goals for me is that you either achieve it or you don't. It's kind of a black and white thing, right? Because you have a specific date by which you're going to achieve X, Y, or Z. No, R isn't realistic. Anyway, so I prefer intentions, because that gives a goal a greater breadth to me. It gives it a greater breadth to be moving into a state of being rather than doing. Because oftentimes when we have goals, it becomes about a doing to achieve the goal, and then the goal is done, and then you have to create another goal. Whereas an intention is a space of beingness. And again, this is going back to our topic this morning of perspective. There's a shift of perspective from doing, achieving, accomplishing, driving, to being, presencing, connecting, intending. The old paradigm is goal driven, and is very much driven by doing and will and force. And the notion of intention is founded more in alignment and emergence and adaptability and collaboration. So it's interesting to be navigating the bridge between those two realms. And how do we allow ourselves this shift of perspective that moves us from doingness to being? It's a radical shift of perspective, and part of it is founded in trust and faith. Belief that things are unfolding as they are meant to unfold. It doesn't mean we sit back and do nothing, but we can bring ourselves into a space of receptivity and responsiveness and alignment, and then quote unquote right action emerges from that space, from a space of inspiration, inspired action. And it's a very different perspective. It's a very different paradigm. Instead of moving from have to and this space of will to moving into inspiration and joy and fulfillment and delight. And so the perspective comes from a place also of sufficiency, a space of enough. Like I am enough just by virtue of being. And beyond that, I don't need to prove anything. I can just allow the life to express itself. And the more I get out of the way, the more that current of life is able to move through and direct me into those inspired actions. So Rosalind says, the mind is an instrument of the soul. I'm blossoming into greater impact. Oh, I love that. So the mind can be an instrument of the soul, which is pretty much what I'm saying is, like a vehicle for life to be expressing itself through us. When we get out of the way, a lot of time, the mind is directing us away from the things that life wants to express, because it's not practical, it's not realistic. How am I going to make money doing that? And I have to prove myself. We have all these reasons why we impede this expression of our heart and soul. And so it means getting out of our minds in some respect. When we're out of our minds, we can be more present to our soul. And when we have the ability to use our mind as an instrument of the soul, that's a testament to our deeper alignment, I think. And that's when we come into deeper expression of our potential, our unique potential as this unique vehicle for the expression of life. It's fun stuff to think about, and different perspectives. And so the thing, just to circle back around to the takeaway from the conversation, is that it is our perspective that shapes our experience. And the vantage point from which we look at something, when we have a bird's eye view, we can see the connections and interconnections much more clearly. And maybe we get to relish them more thoroughly that way. So I think that's it for today. It's Friday, and that's a fun way to wrap up our week, is by remembering that we get to choose perspectives, that we get to choose to be able to shift them and to view things from a different vantage point and make elective choices, which is a reflection of freedom, I think. So that's it for this today and for this week. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I want to thank you so much for your engagement and your willingness to have these sometimes confronting conversations. And until next time, so much love to you.